It's Anna from Ishmael Interactive, and this week I wanted to talk about the CX of measurement, power, and impact. And so this newsletter comes from some thinking I've been doing around the work of Albert Hirschman, who in 1945 articulated a market concentration index that showed the relationship between international trade and power. And I know this might seem a little bit odd to tie together with CX, but I promise we're going to get there. So a little bit about Hirschman's work. So what his work said was that this invisible hand of the marketplace is actually kind of nonsensical. And that's because the invisible hand of the marketplace only looks at the volume of trades, right? So if the marketplace has a lot of supply, not a lot of demand, then it'll right itself because the price of the things that are in oversupply will go down until it meets demand, right? That's lovely. That's great if you're only looking at trades. But Hirschman was interested in the bigger picture, which of course we're always interested in, I think, in this day and age. And that bigger picture is, what are the size of trades in relationship to any market? He did this at the national level, and he also did this for individual companies. And the way that he did this was by looking at not only a volume of trades, but the size of the market. Okay. And so, what I think is that this logic also scales down to individual organizations and programs. It's convenient to measure CX, or customer experience success, in simple units like stakeholders served or products sold. But those measures don't actually capture success as much as they document sort of the simple trade, right? The simple trade of like whatever the customer has come to your organization for and what they got out of it and what your organization got out of it. If you want to understand success, you have to look at context. So how do we do that? For Hirschman, it meant taking the firms and calculating their trade volumes, like I said, against the size of their market to understand their market shares. In individual organizations and programs, that means figuring out how to measure the market you're in. And that's something that is very rarely done. I've actually never seen it done really before. If you have an example, please let me know, because I would absolutely love to read that. I have two examples, really, really easy ones that are pretty common that I think you'll recognize that illustrate my point here. So if you're working in government contracting, say you're in 1102 or you're working on some team related to 1102s, a typical milestone for you would be how many contracts have been successfully awarded or completed in a certain amount of time. But whether or not those awards are the best possible versions of those awards is undocumented. And the assumption is that they are, right? Because everybody's going through this with good intent. Everyone's trying to do their best job, but there's no actual measure of that, right? Because there's no concept of a contract's market that is measured. Every contract sort of goes through on its own. It's a little individual unit, and that's how it's been. Another example is that when an organization goes on an efficiency drive, work that requires a lot of staffing is going to take a hit right off the bat. Work that has long-term goals of decreasing staffing is also going to take a hit, because that long-termness doesn't really fit in the strategic timeline that's been articulated in our particular circumstance or hypothetical thing that we're doing here. But programs that are in the happy situation of not requiring a ton of staff and also being able to conform to this efficiency drive often get lauded or at least slip through. And that is strange and bad for the organization, because those programs, those drives, maybe don't actually create efficiencies, but it doesn't get measured because the context of each program is not considered. The only thing that's considered is whether or not the strategic goal of efficiency has been achieved. So what do we do from here, right? For Hirschman, that solution was to use additional context-driven data, right? The market share. I propose that organizations do the same thing before setting strategic goals. Hirschman could only use human data gathering abilities, right? But we have hugely powerful tools now, right? We have more data than we know what to do with. We have artificial intelligence to help us sort through it in many cases, and we should use them. There's no reason why the power of indices should not now be applied to individual companies, individual programs within those companies, right? We've used indices for a really long time to track mission achievement at a very strategic level in lots of organizations, but we rarely use the same approach to program level goals. And that's just because it's really hard. But now, with the amazing amount of data we have and the tooling that we have to take advantage of it, we can do that, and we should. And we should, because that will actually help us get to our strategic goals better. We need to pull ourselves out of this sort of individual KPI, key performance indicator scores like click-through rates, net promoter scores, and things like that, and really understand the impact that individual programs are having in alignment with strategic goals. I researched and wrote the Human Centered Design Measurement Guide in order to do this. That guide is not yet on Digital Gov, but we do maintain a version of it over on ishmaalinteractive.com. You can see the link in the text below if you want to check it out. And if you want to talk anything about creating indices for your program or your organization, please let me know. I would love to talk to you about it. We really need to be able to leverage the power of our tooling and our data to actually align with strategic goals. We haven't done it yet, and I think this is a really, really amazing time for anyone who's interested in actual experience measurement to be working. So I would love to hear from anyone out there who is doing this, who's been thinking about this, who wants to bounce ideas. It would be really, really great. So that's it for this week. I'm Anna Monroe from Ishmael Interactive. Thank you for listening. I'll just close us up with what we're reading this week. Again, you can see all the links in the text below. Turns out, first thing, for the first time in over a decade, if you want to have a higher salary, you should stay at your job. That's from theeconomist.com. There is a paywall, but it's a great article. I really, really encourage you to take a look at it. It's super interesting to see sort of the reversal of an over a decades long trend in employment. Angela Collier, who is a physicist, produced a video that is a really, really interesting takedown of AI applications in the commercial sector. It's super entertaining. Link is below. And in the end, we're also reviewing our humanity this summer by rereading Don Norman's The Design of Everyday Things. Don Norman is the person who first articulated human-centered design. That is to say, everything that we make should put the human in the center of it. Obviously, here at Ishmael Interactive, we are huge fans of that. It's a great book. He's a cognitive scientist, so even if you're interested in this as sort of passing, it's an easy read. It's a great read for August. That's it for this week. We'll see you next week, and thanks again for listening. Talk to you later.